fossil fuel industry is hurting our political system, we got good news for you today. It's also destroying your portfolio.
So you invest intentionally.
If someone tells you don't look at risk, you want to look at the risk.
I'm John Powers, and I have the honor to be here both to be with AREI-AREDAY once again, but also with my two compatriots and very good friends. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about is about values. I come from the background in this context of being part of a foundation, and we're going to talk about what happens when you apply your values to your investments, to your financial situation. And it's representative, whether you're a foundation or an individual, you have these same choices to make with what you do with your money when you give it away, or what you do with your money as you invest it to make it a tool to try to achieve climate solutions. Tom Van Dyck I've known since 1993 when he started working with our foundation. We started doing socially responsible investing, which now, of course, is called ESG, Environmental, Social, and Governance. Tom founded an organization called You Sow, which is national leader in doing shareholder actions and other things. You'll get to hear from them. Tom is our investment manager who selects the investment advisors we work with. Andy is a complementary contribution to what we're trying to achieve, utilizing your financial assets as an expression of your values and an expression of a means to address climate change, which, as of today, we're all going to agree we're never going to use the term climate change again. It was developed by a Republican pollster, Frank Luntz. Climate change is right. You go from winter, you go to spring, you go from spring to summer. That sounds good. They corrupted the idea of what's happening is the planet is overheating. So today, we're all going to take a pact. We're never going to use climate change again. We can use climate crisis, we can use climate catastrophe, but it's global warming. And you're going to hear from two national leaders on how you can utilize your assets. Tom Van Dyck.
Thanks, John. Thanks for inviting me today, Chip. Thanks for a great panel this morning. We heard a lot today about how the fossil fuel industry is hurting our political system, destructing our democracy, it's destroying our planet. We got good news for you today. It's also destroying your portfolio. So how many people here sit on a board of a foundation or have your own money in the stock market, et cetera? Pretty much everybody. How many people here have divested from fossil fuels completely in your portfolio? Outstanding. Well, you're going to learn that that was actually a good thing. And any of your friends that haven't done that yet, they may want to consider doing that now. Oh, John, we're going to go to your presentation. There we go. Oh, just scroll. Okay. So here's performance and ESG. So here's the nice news. So many people say recently, a couple years ago, the energy sector did extremely well because of the Ukraine war. And you're like, if you had divested from fossil fuels, you didn't participate in that entire run of the energy sector. But since we're not market timers or gamblers and we're investors, let's take a little longer term time frame as to how the energy sector is actually done. The first thing you need to know is there's not a single renewable energy company in the energy sector of the S&P 500. Just think Exxon and Chevron. It's the largest oil and gas companies in the country. So let's take it back from the market peaks, because we don't want to be time sensitive, because you can torch the numbers, they'll testify to anything. But let's start from the market peak in 07 and the market bottom in 09. So we're not taking an end game. We're going to start from those points. The energy sector, the S&P 500, from the market peak, gave you 71% total return. The S&P over that time frame gave you almost a 300% total return. The technology sector, you can see, is leading. Think about renewable energy as actually the digitization of energy. So it's technology disrupting an outdated industry. Go from the market low. The energy sector, 213%, the S&P 773% return. So it's giving you a third of the return of the S&P 500, 30% from either the peak or the bottom. Now the question is, since investing is about risk and return, how much risk did it take to get you a third of the return of the S&P? It took 30% more risk. So you have to ask yourself, Why do we need to invest in oil and gas at all if it's going to give me a 30% return with 30% more risk? It's a great question for some of the states that may be doing woke ESG, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you broaden it out further to incorporate all environment, social, and governance, or socially responsible investing, where you avoid tobacco, weapons, and focus on good companies, well-run management teams, there's something called the Domini Index that's been out there since 1990. They eliminated 250 companies to the S&P 500. Then they added in certain companies so they had enough industry diversity so that they could be compared against the S&P, and then they added 50. Back then it was Ben and Jerry's of the world. So they had 400 companies. They went live in 1990, and over this 33-year time frame, they've actually outperformed the S&P on an actual and risk-adjusted basis. And you see the numbers right there, 10.7% versus 10.29%. A half a point per year in outperformance. They took more risk to get that return, but the Sharpe ratio, which shows risk-adjusted return, shows that they actually got a better risk-adjusted return than the S&P. So if you invest in good management teams that work for the shareholders, their employees, the communities, and their customers, you're going to do better if you're a long-term investor rather than just a market timer and a gambler. Now, Chip wanted me to update the Divest Invest movement, and John's foundation was one of the first ones to actually divest in 2013. But in 2014, when Rockefeller joined the movement and that big demonstration in New York City, it was $50 billion. Fast forward 10 years, today it's $40 trillion, led by the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is the largest investor in the world. They own literally 1.5% of every single company on the planet. So these different institutions have pledged to divest from fossil fuels and invest, more importantly, in creating the world that you heard about earlier today. In fact, the Inflation Reduction Act, as Government Ritter had pointed out, is one of the mainstays of the Biden administration and a huge bill for the United States and its benefits. That benefit is it's leveraged about $240 billion in assets, in investments, in and across the entire United States. As Sandy pointed out, McDonald pointed out, the nice thing about renewable energy is it can be in every single congressional district and all over the planet. It's the democratization of energy as well as the digitization of energy. And that democratization actually lands 60% more in red districts than it does in blue districts, even though not a single Republican voted for the bill. And you can see that some of the districts that are benefiting, even Marjorie Taylor Greene's got a very large solar plant going in her district. And remarkably, it's creating a lot of jobs. So one could hope that those job creations are sooner or later going to go to the representatives and say, hey, you know, what are you doing fighting all this renewable energy? Kind of like what we heard earlier today in these rural districts, where if you get a wind farm, actually you can collect taxes that actually benefits the rural communities and start benefiting them. So the idea, this will start filtering down, and we have to hit every single level because this democratization of energy can help us turn the political tide as well. Now let's look at the ESG and the attack on ESG. These states and people that would rather not have us look at environment, social, and governance things because it's woke. Let's look at the risks associated with fossil fuels. There's investment risk. If you build a fossil fuel plant today, there's a high degree of probability you will never be able to utilize the full operation of that plant because you'll destroy the planet. Plus, you're not economical. There's a technology risk, which we talked about with digitization. There's stranded asset risk, which means that companies actually hold on their balance sheets carbon reserves that they view as an asset, which is actually not an asset at all because it'll be stranded. Litigation risk, as we found out, not unlike tobacco, that Exxon's scientists back in the 70s knew full well the impacts of CO2 on the climate and obfuscated starting in 1985. They have exposure there. You got carbon pricing risk, regulatory risk, peak demand for oil, as Senator Tim Wirth pointed out earlier today. Governor Ritter mentioned how those 12 states that they have political difficulties in. Well, the gray states are all the states that are fighting ESG. The purple is everyone that's supporting it. And the white ones, they're neutral. Okay? Here's some of the legislation that they're passing that's going to have economic impact on their taxpayers. Texas says prohibits municipalities from contracting with banks that have ESG policies. That means JP Morgan. That means the vast majority of banks have ESG policies. That means they can't bid on their municipal bonds. That has a consequence to the taxpayers because it increases the cost of those bonds. These states would rather say, it's like the movie, don't look up. Don't pay attention to climate change. It's not coming. Oklahoma, authorizing a blacklist of financial entities. So they're limiting access to information. They say, don't take all this information in when you're making an investment decision. I don't know how limiting access to information ever leads to a better investment decision, right? Here's the cost, though. California has a lower credit rating. Governor Newsom loves this slide, by the way. We have a lower credit rating, but the cost of floating bonds is less than that of Texas and Florida because they don't take climate risk into account. To the extent of 40 basis points, it's over $400 million for Texas taxpayers that they are paying to finance their municipalities in interest costs that they don't need to be paying because they're not taking climate risk into account. Andy, you might want to share some of the things that we're doing with As You Sow and how some of these various Republicans are taking us on. Sure. How do I turn this off? Or do you want me to shift to John? Let's go like that. Appendix.
Yes, I'll just pick up where Tom left off. So I'm Andy Behar. I'm the CEO of As You Sow, as in So Shall You Reap. Tom founded the organization in 1992. We've been around 31 years. We focus on corporate accountability, and we do it from the lens of shareholders. So just sort of picking up the thread, if someone tells you don't look at risk, you want to look at the risk. When they say just close your eyes and do not assess, well, climate risk or any risk, do not look at any of the factors, that's exactly what you want to be looking at, and that's what's going on. And this is an effort that's very well funded by fossil fuel companies, led by a guy named Leonard Leo, who you might know from the Federalist Society, who's brought us all of our Supreme Court and all of our right-wing judges. He got $1.6 billion to create an anti-ESG campaign. This was about a year and a half ago. And what this is a response to the work that As You Sow does and all of our colleagues do, because what we've been doing is we engage corporations. So we do a great deal of research, and then we sit down with the companies and we say, look, these are your scores on either climate or on, we look at how CEOs are incentivized to reduce emission risks. We also look at things like racial justice, diversity, equity, inclusion. And we're coming out with a report on DEI in a couple of months. It's going to show you that greater diversity leads to outperformance in 14 key financial metrics. We show them actual math, and we sit down with companies, and we take them through why actually making change is going to be good for themselves, for their employees, for their customers, for everyone involved. So we had 210 engagements last year with companies. 99 companies said, you guys are like McKinsey for free. Thank you. This is great information. We're going to go become better companies. 111 did not, so we escalated. We filed shareholder resolutions, which is a 500-word document you file 6 months before the annual meeting. And once we did that, because everyone gets to vote on it, all the shareholders, 56 of them said, okay, we'll do what you want. We withdrew the resolutions. So about 25% of them went to a vote. Now those votes are non-binding, but it's very important to send a message as shareholders. Now, folks like Vanguard and BlackRock, they vote against us, well, Vanguard 98% of the time, this year BlackRock 93% of the time. And a lot of that was the pressure from Leonard Leo, who got 21 state attorneys general to send a letter to BlackRock and Vanguard, mentioned As You Sow 39 times, and they said if you vote for one of their resolutions, we're going to potentially sue you. So the asset managers were just cowering in fear, and they no longer support that. So we've started an effort now to take back our power. We believe that anyone who earns the money gets to decide how it's invested and gets to use their power of their proxy. And we're doing this actually at As You Sow. Our 401k plan, we've had a completely sustainable plan now since 2015. We created a platform. It was originally fossil-free funds. It's now called Invest Your Values because we expanded to look at deforestation and private prisons and gender inequality and weapons, all kinds of things. And so we rate and rank, there'll be 6,000 mutual funds every month, and we aggregate them up for these 401k plans. Now, there's 100 million people with $10 trillion in 401k plans and 403b plans that have no clue that they're invested in the extractive economy. The CEO of Saudi Aramco sits on the BlackRock board. Every one of us who's in a 401k plan at any company, we own Saudi Aramco, we own Exxon, we own Chevron, we own deforestation. We're not aware of it. We earn this money so we can retire, put it in an account. The people we give it to, other than Tom, put it into the extractive economy. And we've abdicated our right to vote, to critique the companies. So we want to take back that power. And the way we're doing it is we've created what's called a multiple employer plan, which will have all sustainable investing, so fossil-free, deforestation-free, weapon-free, private prison-free, and you'll have your right to vote. Now, 20% of every vote is coming from Vanguard and BlackRock. They control them. 25% of people don't even vote at all. They literally just like throw away their mail-in ballots. And so we're going to take back this right, and anyone can do it. It's really, people say, how are you going to do this? It's impossible. Vanguard and BlackRock, they have all the money. And I go, they have no money. They have your money and your permission to vote against you and to use your power you've given them to create an unlivable planet. So we're going to be organizing, we're planning for March 4th, because we like the name of the day. So March 4th for a livable planet, send a letter to your 401k administrator, say, I want a sustainable investment and I want my power back. If 51% of Amazon employees do it, they're going to have to change. So we want to take this back, because what happens is, in 2021, we put, As You Sow put 3 people on the Exxon board through a negotiation. We wrote a new business plan for them and brought a 6-person board forth. This was after 10 years of filing resolutions and getting no results and having a majority vote. Probably you all know Engine 1 ran 4 people, they got 3. So we ended up with 5 people on the board, but it was ineffective because it's a 12-person board. You need a majority of the board, and you need the votes. And the reason we didn't have 7 people on the board is so it's a few thousand votes. So we created another platform called As You Vote, which is a highly ESG-aligned platform. We vote against 80% of CEO pay packages. We vote against about 70% of board, vote for all the resolutions. And so we're going to be making this a movement of people with money to take back their power. Because ultimately, the board reports to us. Every publicly traded board reports to their shareholders. And it's because we've given away our power that we don't have any. So all we have to do is click our heels together. We're already there. And it's like, look in the mirror. You see an empowered person. It's okay, Dorothy, you're there. And simply demand it. So this is a movement that's going to be, I'm announcing it here today. We just got permission from our board on Monday to create this multiple employer plan. And you'll be hearing a lot about it. But it's time for shareholders to take back their power and to actually, if needed, take over the boards, because they report to us. And any company that doesn't have a climate transition plan, that doesn't have racial justice, that doesn't have diversity, they need a new board. They're not doing their proper job of oversight. And it's our job as shareholders to do our job and to make sure that they do that, because it's in the best interest of all the stakeholders. I think that's my 5 minutes. Oh, and I didn't tell you one other thing. Jim Jordan filed an investigation on us for antitrust activities about a month ago. Yeah, it was us, and interestingly, us and Engine 1, ISS Glass Lewis, CalPERS, the largest pension fund in the country. And most of them are, from what we hear, giving them the discovery. They're looking for papers. We've told them no, that Congress doesn't have the power to do an enforcement action, nor does antitrust make sense for a nonprofit. So we'll see how it all rolls out. I think Jim Jordan's a little busy right now, but we think we'll hear from him soon. His main point in the letter was that asking a company to decarbonize infringes on the freedom of all Americans. And we fundamentally disagree. We think that getting a company to decarbonize enhances the freedom of all Americans. So it will be an interesting public conversation that we hope to be having soon.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to demonstrate what happens when you apply principles that Tom and Andy have spoken about, we couldn't do this with our foundation or myself personally, my own portfolio, without such expertise. So I'm going to give you from the presentation point of the foundation that I'm with, the Educational Foundation of America, and also a secondary foundation, the Prentice Foundation. Private foundations are required by IRS law to give away, essentially, 5% of your asset value every year. But you do that in grants. You try to set your goals. What do you want to achieve? But what do you do with the other 95% of your assets? So we call this the 100% solution, the 100% utilization, when you use both your grants and you align them with how you invest and what you do with your investments. This is what you hear oftentimes. You probably may hear it if you have your own financial advisors. Hey, leave me alone. You're going to get an SRI, you're going to get an ESG, you're going to take a financial hit. If you hear that from your advisor, it's time to look for a new one because they don't have the facts. They always say, leave us alone, we'll invest, we'll give you more money to give away. But then you end up with this kind of solution. You've given your money to your investment manager, they invest it for you, and they put it into a way that this is supposed to be moving forward. So what you achieve, unfortunately, is you contribute to the problem that you're trying to solve with your grants, that you make that problem worse with your investments. Divest, invest. You want to take money out of things that are climate harmful and you want to put it into climate solutions, okay? So in this case, you'll see at the top, divesting from fossil fuels. Well, you take your money out, you have some liquid assets, what are you going to put them in? This is where we invest our values, and this is consistent with our grants, what we want to do with our goals. But that's still 95% of the portfolio. Part of it is how you invest, and part of it is what Andy helps provide, is how do you utilize it as a political tool inside a corporation, so where the government may be failing to make policy, now you have a chance to use business and to establish new policy with business. And I think being active with your own assets, you can invest. Some people say don't divest completely because you're not part of the solution. Okay, fine. There's a certain minimum amount of money that you have to keep in a stock. You have $5,000, whatever. So you keep $20,000 because market fluctuation may drop below the $5,000. So you invest intentionally so that you can be the proponent, a filer or a co-filer in a shareholder action. And that's why you see here, again, we're trying to look for the holistic solution, what you can do with your grants, what you can do with your personal donations, and what you can do with your investments. So we've used private equity to great success, selected by Tom. These are some of the companies that have come out of our private equity investments and have become public. And this is part of the reason why we've been financially successful. So there's a study that was performed by the Council on Foundations. And the reason I'm talking about this is to validate. You may hear in a certain sense what theory is, but I'm showing you what happens when the theory gets applied and what the results are. And in the Council on Foundations study, you can see the 42% on the first circle. That's our foundation asset range for the Educational Foundation of America. It's a little over 200 million. So we're 42% of the foundations were in that category. And then we're a private foundation, 18% are in that category. But the results that you're about to see are against the entire field. It's not just within our sector, okay? So there's 171 private foundations that were measured and 106 community foundations. So it's a total of 277 foundations. And this is the result. If you see, particularly investing for long-term, not market timing, if you look at the far right-hand column that says 10 years, and you can see the first line is the median of all the foundations that were measured. And you can see the quartiles, the percentages. If you look at the bottom two rows, that's the two foundations I'm engaged with. And over 10 years, you can see that we've had a 14 and a 13.9% return compared to the others. We are so far above the 90th percentile, we don't know how. We could be 1, we could be 2, we could be 3, we don't know. You can applaud for these guys, because these are the ones who have made it possible. Now, Tom talked about what we call Putin's war and the impact, right? So you have a portfolio that's worth 100 units. And let's say it goes down by 70%. You've gone down because you've invested in fossil fuels. You've gone from 100 units down to 30. Putin invades Ukraine, and the price of oil goes up, and your portfolio doubles. It goes from 30 units to 60 units. Remember where you started? 100 units. Right, so the point is, this is 2021 numbers. We are not invested. We took a hit. You know the difference between weather and climate, right? There's a weather event. There's a 1-year return. And there's a climate, which is longitudinal. Right? So you'll see the next year, we are again in the far right in the green. You'll see we didn't do so well on the 3-year and the 1-year numbers because we were not invested in fossil fuels. And by the way, anybody who wants this presentation, happy to contact me, and I've had a much longer version of it as well, 10 minutes. But this is just to validate the impacts of long-term investment, long-term time horizon, an investment portfolio statement that expresses your values and what you want to see in the world that you live and how you, as an investor, if you don't think you're an investor, tell me a night that you haven't been sitting at your dinner table and somebody calls up and says, I'm with the fill-in, the police athletic league or whatever, right? Every one of us is a donor because you go through the same process. Is this a topic I'm interested in? Is this a group that I'm interested in? Have they had good results? Do they need my money? So every one of you is an investor. So everything you see here, you can put yourself in the same shoes that I'm presenting. This shows, again, this is 2021, so it's prior to Putin's war. But this is the difference. This is how much more money we made in that green number up there by investing with our values. This shows, forgive me, this is a time frame you'll see since we started investing with Tom in 1996 to 2021. You can see over that period we have $197 million more dollars. This is what has happened since we divested in 2013. $91 more million since 2013. This is what can happen when you bring to fruition your values and apply them to your assets, both in financial returns and in what you can achieve with companies to try to offset the shortcomings we have governmentally and the inefficiencies and the ineffectiveness of their policies. You can do it through business. So that is my presentation, and I'm going to go sit down, and you all have a chance to ask questions so that you can, anything we didn't cover, you will have the chance to ask. Thank you.
We have questions?
Hello. If I want to hire your company to invest my money, and I don't believe in SpaceX because there's so much controversial information out there as to how it's not good for our environment, do I have the choice to say no to SpaceX and then you invest in other?
Yes, you can customize your screens according to what you want. SpaceX is also a private company, so it's not publicly traded at this point.
I have a question. And I will explain in a minute why I'm asking this question.
Please make it a question. Please keep it tight in time.
The reason why, and whether it's true, that asset-backed securities have a premium in the form of about 2% lower interest for borrowers. Have you looked into that? I can tell you why I'm asking the question, but if you don't want, I will not tell you.
We can talk afterwards. I'm not sure what asset-backed securities you're referring to. Mortgage-backed securities, real estate. What are you talking about? I mean, it's a broad
I am
sector.
talking
Asset-backed
about
securities.
new type of asset-backed securities, which I patented. I got a patent in May of 2023.
Okay, so why don't we talk afterwards? We can talk about it.
Okay, let's talk about afterwards. It's very important. Actually, I'm giving a presentation on that tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Perfect.
Thank you. Great presentation. I do think that money is going to make the difference in the incentives to do climate solutions. Appreciate what you're doing about investing. Tom, I'm curious how we can get banks and insurance companies to stop loaning money to fossil fuels.
Yeah, I know it's a big problem since every bank seems to want to do it and they don't want to shut it off. We've been in dialogue with RBC for obvious reasons, putting pressure on them through outside campaigns, through internal use of assets. John's foundation, other foundations have talked to them. We are in an ongoing conversation with the bank about restricting use of fossil fuels. I firmly believe that the first bank that fully divests from fossil fuels will have more money coming to them than they turn away from investment banking relationships than anything else. So that's the key. Right now, there isn't a single bank that doesn't finance fossil fuels. So, our client's like, why are you at RBC? You should move. I'm like, okay, where do you want me to move?
Yeah, we've been engaging actually all the major banks.
Yeah.
We started in the Dakota Access Pipeline. They were obviously putting this pipeline across sacred indigenous land. They were sticking dogs on the people who were protesting this, and so we filed a resolution with J.P. Morgan, Citibank, Wells Fargo, Morgan Stanley. I remember these conversations, and they said to us, "Well, we just gave it to this group. We don't know what they're doing with the money," and we're like, but your brand, Morgan Stanley's brand, is now associated with sicking dogs on indigenous people protecting their land. And they were like, oh, really? It's like, yes, really. Look at this, read this resolution. And it became known as, the term financed emissions became kind of like when a bank makes a loan, and then we apply this also to insurance companies. So when you underwrite a fossil fuel project, your brand is now associated with it. And so as shareholders, we've demanded that they disclose that information. And so we're getting disclosure so people are able to actually discern which banks are making what kind of investments. And if you go to investyourvalues.org and you type in any mutual fund, there's a tab for banks and insurance companies, and there's all the ratings and rankings of exactly how much of which bank is in every mutual fund and what that bank's doing and how they're rated. We go into incredible detail onto literally every company within every mutual fund.
Where's that again?
Investyourvalues.org.
I just want to insert a quick story, which was so fun. Tom proposed to our foundation, to the investment committee, that maybe we might want to divest in 2013. And he said, who wants to divest? All hands went up. Okay, we'll come up with a 3 to 5 year plan for you. How about 2 weeks? Oh, we can't do that in 2 weeks, but we will do it. We did divest. But what does divestment mean? Well, there's the Filthy 15, which is the coal companies. There's the Underground 200. But what about all the supply line, the supply chain? So we asked Andy, how the heck are we ever going to find out how we're going to divest at depth? And he created a tool. This is like, you don't understand. These are two of the national leaders in this. We looked, we know. Andy developed a tool that you can also all use called fossilfreefunds.org. It's a website, fossilfreefunds.org. And you can stick the name of your mutual fund in there. Impenetrable though your investment advisors may tell you that they can't tell you the composition of your mutual fund. When you do fossilfreefunds.org, that Andy developed as an answer to the question, how do we divest at depth? You can run your mutual fund through it and you can find out just how much fossil fuels your mutual fund is investing in. And then if you have 401k or if you have something, you can go to those investment managers. I want an alternative.
Yeah, when we started, there were 10 funds that got an A on fossil free. Now there's about 400. It was about 1.2 billion. This is 2015. Now it's about 400 billion. So there is demand for these, these investment vehicles that are fossil free. And then we got another grant to build on deforestation free, so you can look at palm oil and timber and pulp and everything, why they're burning down the Indonesian and Amazon rainforests. And what we find is, it's interesting, we have this whole thing going on with Amazon where, they're buying 100,000 electric vehicles. They're doing some good stuff on climate. But every single person who works at Amazon owns companies burning down the Amazon. And so we did this a social media campaign to all, I'm sorry, what did I say?
Through their 401k.
Yeah, through their 401k. And so, like the people who work there no one has any idea what they're invested in. I mean, it's like a species level thing. I mean, every pension fund, no one has any idea. And across the whole planet, we all work hard. We put away 5% of our money to retire, and then we hand it off, and it gets invested in an unlivable planet. It's a remarkable kind of attribute of our species that we just don't want to know, and we've handed off our power. So that's what we're trying, just to have transparency as a starting point.
Osprey?
Thanks so much for the incredible work you're doing. It's just awesome. So at our organization, we do a lot of work with the banks and asset management firms around divesting and moving their funds out of fossil fuels into renewable energy and other positive investments. And so I just wanted to bring back up that point again to see, in your engagement with financial institutions, you've proven that over the long term, you're getting better return by not investing in harmful products or activities. And I'm just really curious, why are these financial institutions not making the move? They can see the long-term return is better. You've proven that. So I'm just, we hit our head against the wall on this, and I'd be really curious to find out what the issue is. And then just a quick thing also on the anti-ESG movement. We're seeing a lot of the banks that we're engaged in and asset management firms, as you said, being afraid now because of these lawsuits. So I'd love to hear your response to both, how you're addressing that with the financial institutions. Thanks.
Well, quickly, people don't like moving their monies from a bank. As you probably know, none of the people who work at JP Morgan were even willing to sign a letter to send to Jamie Dimon to say divest from fossil fuels. So it's hard to get people to move their money from a bank. That's one. Two, the investment banking relationships of these banks is what's keeping them tied into the fossil fuel industry. So imagine the investment banker's kind of like the crack addict of the financial field. They're just looking for a deal. They don't care where the deal is. They're going to go raise some money, make some fees, and then go on to the next deal. So that usually accounts for about 40 to 60% of a bank's revenue and profits. So they're kind of addicted to that stream. So as the fossil fuel industry declines, as I've told them, I said, look, you got to build a clean tech investment bank because that's where the future is. But they're like, yeah, but we're addicted to this now, so we'll do this, but we need a just transition, right? That's the just transition. What does that mean? What's a just transition? Well, they take advantage of Lakota access and in low wealth communities, whether white or people of color, they're exploiting that. They still are addicted to that. So that's what we have to unplug them from, is the investment banking side, because that's the hard part where it's really hard to do that.
And just going back to Louisiana, there's 120 new petrochemical plants being built in Cancer Alley right now. And this morning we had a presentation about what's going on in Louisiana. I mean, these are cracker plants. These are taking the gas from the Marcellus Shale and cracking it into all the component pieces to make plastics. This is plastic feedstocks that will end up as single-use plastics in our oceans. So it is a continuous flow, and they're siting them right on top of other stuff, which is fence line to all these communities that are already completely overburdened. So this is where the investment. This is Exxon, Chevron, Phillips. They're all continuing to invest in that kind of infrastructure that. We go to them and say, look, this is stranded. This is going to be stranded because the amount of plastics is decreasing. Just quickly, we had an engagement with McDonald's, Starbucks, and Dunkin'. Through our shareholder engagement, got them all to agree to stop using styrofoam on a global basis. So 3 billion styrofoam cups are not being produced this year and next year and next. So that's feedstocks that's going to affect the demand for fossil fuels. But they know that the internal combustion engine is going to be obsolete. They are very aware of this in their business plans. So they're shifting everything to plastics. You may have noticed the plastics are getting thicker and harder. There's more actual plastic in it. It's just a massive dumping. And so you got to stop the demand, which we're doing with EVs and the obsolescence of the internal combustion engine, but they're shifting over to plastics, which has an unbelievable, toxic footprint as well. I don't know if that answers any of your questions, Osprey.
Prior to Putin's war, 24% of the oil and gas Exxon Chevron's profits came from single-use plastic. 24%. So 75% comes from destroying the atmosphere and the air and the planet. The other 24% destroys our oceans. So this industry should, and we subsidize it, as we heard earlier today. It's the most heavily subsidized industry on the planet.
Plus, it's all in our bodies. Every one of us has 70,000 pieces of microplastic in our bodies. So, like the planet Earth, someone else said, we are one with the Earth. Right. As the Earth is full of plastic, so are our bodies and the toxins that come out of that. So we have a real situation here where these oil companies, and this is why we own the companies. The boards report to us. We have to take over the boards, and we have to simply change the trajectory of these companies. Exxon could transition into a company that's focused on a lot of other things than oil production. Chevron could too. Or these companies, simply don't have a future. We question whether they're viable at all.
With two final questions. We have one over here, then one from Sue Ann.
I'm just like, where are your commercials at? I would love to have this all over Instagram, all over EarthX TV, all over everywhere, because it's like, I know so many young Gen Z investors who's getting the Robinhood app or whatever, you know what I mean, who don't understand that this is basically what we call in my neighborhood hustling backwards. If you want to save the planet, this ain't the way to do it. So do you need help with like wording, advertising, spokesman? Let me know, because I would love to craft messaging or help this get out to the folks who look like me, who care about this issue, who want to have this message go everywhere. So
we can talk afterwards too.
They brought business cards with them.
We need to build a movement of 100 million people, and it's not difficult. That's the thing. What I've discovered is that you say to people, look, this is the future. This is a livable planet for you and your children, your grandchildren. And they're like, can I do it in one click? And it's like, yes, okay, I'm in. What about 2 clicks? Nah, that's too much of an ask. So we've gotten it down to, I have to simplify it to that level. But we've built the infrastructure now. We've built transparency systems and voting systems and investment systems. So it's got to be simplified, and yes, we have to have a message, so we'll be speaking after the panel.
So he's talking about as you vote, and one of the things we do is we're filing with companies because our political system is broken to say, look, you have to come up with a plan to be net zero. So we look at the Russell 3000, the 3,000 largest companies in the United States, and get them to come up with a plan to be net zero by 2040. Scope 1, 2, and 3, which includes their supply chain. If the political system's still broken and they come up with a plan and execute, and because we are shareholders and we own them, we can demand that. So we can still create the change that we want to save the planet for our kids and grandkids and 7 generations afterwards.
Sue Ann.
A little bit of a follow-up on DJ there, in that, what are you doing with CNBC? I mean, we hear so much financial information, but we don't hear this. And if you really want to, what I like about everything you're saying is everybody can participate in a solution. And that message I never hear when I watched CNBC and the stock market and stuff.
That's why
like
Jim Jordan sent the letter. They don't want shareholders to speak up at annual meetings. Okay, they don't want shareholders to take their power back. They're happy having Fidelity and Vanguard vote or not vote at all, because if you don't vote, it defaults to management. Unlike if you don't vote in a presidential election, it does matter, but your vote doesn't go immediately to the incumbent. In this case, it goes to management.
Get on TV.
I'll talk to you about that.
There's one question in the back, but I sort of think we need to wrap it up here.
What about credit unions? Are they more open to the divesting?
Yes, they're a lot cleaner from that perspective, from a banking perspective. Credit unions are probably better from that perspective. They're not lending out to companies like fossil fuel industries the way the larger banks are. We don't have an investment banking arm.
So part of what we tried to demonstrate today was what you can do. And just an example of, on Friday, the three of us went into the Denver Foundation. We talked to the president of the board, the chairman of the board and the president of the foundation. Since 2013, when they had $440,000 of their entire $550 million portfolio invested in SRI, they're now 60%. We have been pushing them since 2013, and now they are receptive, they are on board, they are ready to go, and they're going to continue to work with us. So find ways that you, as an individual, can do what you can. And looking at your retirement plans and looking how you invest, if you're doing it as an individual with your own portfolio, there are portfolio statements that are out there. We will share ours for the foundation we work with, so you can get an idea. So you can contact any of us. And thank you all for your interest, and thank you all for listening.
So thank you, John, Andy, Tom. And if anybody hasn't seen the Alliance Center in Denver, I would strongly suggest you go check out John's place. They're doing a lot of good work there. For those like me who wanted to write this down, I'm impressed that even our small portfolios can, with Robinhood and whatever, can actually make a difference. Investyourvalues.org and fossilfreefunds.org. All right?